It's James Steinhubel on the Health and Wellness Channel with the Tune In with Power Psychology and Find Your Joy Again, hosted today by Laura Flis, Master Student of Counselling with Power Psychology. How are you doing today?
I'm good, James. Thanks. How are you?
Very well, very well. So, welcome to the show. You've had a number of fine associates come on before you, and all have very interesting things to talk about. So, what are you doing at Power Psychology?
What am I doing? Well, I am completing my final requirement for my master's in counseling psychology, and that is doing a practicum under the guidance of a registered psychologist. So Brittany Meredith is my guru extraordinaire who I go to with all of my things. And part of that for me, I am really passionate about helping people sort of find the solutions within themselves. I think everybody has strengths within them, and it's just whether or not they can reach them. And then I branch out to different groups sort of from that perspective.
So that's interesting. And so, what kind of life path or journey brings you to studying master's counseling?
Mine is a winding road.
Do tell. Let's hear. Let's hear.
Yeah, I think, you know what, I think a lot of people come down different ways to finding their path. So my background initially, when I first went to university out of high school, I focused on sports psychology and on coaching and athletics. So I was a high-level equestrian athlete. I competed in show jumping all around North America. And I also did some coaching in that, and absolutely loved it and loved the mental aspect of that sport, and understanding how people dealt with nerves and anxiety and performance anxiety and those kind of things. However, when I finished my undergraduate degree at that time, the path wasn't clear to getting my master's. So I ended up jumping into my other passion, which was law enforcement. So I became a federal corrections officer and worked in a maximum security prison with male offenders for 10 years. And I did both corrections officers' duties, and I was also the dog handler there. So I played in that world for 10 years and had the opportunity recently to kind of come full circle back into the psychology world and complete my master's, which gave me a really interesting path of life experience, both from the sports psychology side of things, but also with working and understanding, working with first responders and understanding sort of the plights that we experience in that world as well.
So then, in your studies, what and you went back to do your master's. Of course, there's going to be some sort of review there, but coming from worldwide athletic competition and achievement, I'm sure I haven't really been looking and seen, but I'm sure you won, or else you wouldn't be there, right?
Yeah, I had a few
you got
wins.
you got some wins, right? And
some wins, some falls.
right. Yeah, they urge into
Exactly.
the but also in the correction system, you would see a lot on both sides as human beings were, stretched to comply to the requirements of the courts of the penitentiary system. Not easy for both sides.
Absolutely.
So now you're coming back to psychology. You're in your training. What from the new information, but also from your experience, did you find enlightening or giving you an advantage now that you're out in the counseling market?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for life experience. There's a lot to be said for having personally experienced a lot of trauma, and having to work through that and understanding. It's one thing to have the information from a textbook. It's entirely another thing to have applied it to your own life and to know that healing and trauma isn't linear. And the same thing with performing in anxiety-inducing situations. So I find it really interesting in my experience with working in law enforcement and also with athletics. Both are very anxiety-inducing situations. So you have to learn how to perform at a highly anxious state, and you have to learn how to manage that anxiety. And so the two are eerily similar, actually, in how they work with one another, and how you need to be capable of being at this high anxiety, high performance state, but also managing the effects that that has on your mind and body. So having learned that, and learned some of those techniques in my personal life, but also being able to expand on that, those techniques through the Counseling Masters program has just been really invaluable information to have for me.
So what kind of techniques, you know, I've solved them all, because this is definitely your, it's your trade, your profession, and every psychologist or counselor is going to have, ways that they use these technologies, I guess they are. But I'm interested in, so you're at gold medal competitions, far from home, close to winning,
Yeah.
right? The techniques that you use there, to caught in the yard or caught on the floor with, maybe a unit or a penitentiary wide lockdown call.
Yeah.
So almost similar, similar mindset. What technique that is, are you bringing to your counseling, that you're learning, that you can share, or that you want to share? Maybe you don't want to. Maybe we have to come see you.
Come see me and I'll tell you. No. One of the biggest things that I would say that I've learned, and that I've learned how to really focus on, is sort of that triangle between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, and how those three things really impact one another, both back and forth. So it's not necessarily that your thoughts directly impact your behaviors can also impact your thoughts, your feelings, everything's sort of vice versa. Everything can go back and forth. And so having that knowledge allows you almost an element of control over how you're going to deal with, this thought comes up and it's anxiety provoking for me. So what am I going to do? For me, it's something like mindfulness, centering yourself, finding ways to ground yourself, are definitely big ones. And then one of the other techniques that I think is really important, and this applies to athletics, to business, to any high level activity that you're doing, is knowing how to plan ahead. So not just planning for the best case scenario, also planning for the worst case scenario. So having imagined in your mind, okay, if this happens, this is how I can respond. If this happens, that's how I can respond. And really being prepared for all eventualities. And even if something happens that you haven't specifically prepared for, if you've done that sort of preparation along the way, you start to have these tools in your toolbox that you can pull on, that you can go, oh, it's not the end of the world that, in show jumping, I missed a distance to a fence and I knocked a fence down. My whole round is ruined. It's like, no, okay, I need to reset. This is what I prepared for. Same thing in corrections. An offender may do this. This is what we prepared for. There's always that aspect of you don't have control over everything, and there's always that element of surprise that's involved there. But if you've prepared your body to manage that anxiety, it gives you an edge to be able to cope with it and be able to use it in a useful manner, instead of going into that flight or fight mode that we often go into, in our body shutting down. We've taught our mind, no, you can cope with this, you can handle this, and you're able to move through it rather than being frozen by it.
It's one thing I should have brought up last week, and you used the same term. Brittany used it last week as well. And we only tend to talk about half of this response, and it's the fight or flight response. And we always talk about flight. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, that the fight, to stand in that event and battle it, it can be almost as disassociated as the flight mechanism, whereas it could appear that I'm trying to handle this.
Yeah, but it's
and you're actually just The one thing that I wanted to talk about, and I might use the wrong terms, but and in my view, I may be wrong again, but it seems that everybody's got a little bit of autism in them, right? Like a little bit of a daydreamer in them. But with traumatic stress, that sort of disassociated mind is, again, now you look at the high, now I only went so far in my athletics, but I remember some of my best events, right? It was almost the positive version of that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so when you're in that trauma, or you get that sort of lost daydream, but when you're high performing and you remember back to the event, you were almost, but it was a happy time in that
You kind of
zone.
call that like peak performance or flow. It's learning how to sort of get into that flow and live in the anxiety a little bit, because in athletics, the goal is not to be relaxed. Oftentimes people associate sports psychology with learning how to relax and be calm and everything else. And I disagree with that, actually. It's learning how to be okay being anxious, because athletics create anxiety. You are performing, you have trained for this moment, you have one shot to get it right, you don't get a do-over, people are watching, you're being judged, whatever it is. That is anxiety provoking for people. Like, I don't care who you are, you're going to have some anxiety around that. And so it's learning how to take that and go, okay, I can use this in a really adaptive way, or it can completely shut me down. And so it's getting into that sort of higher level of flow in your mind where it just becomes automatic and it becomes comfortable, and you've trained to be automatic.
And then is the trauma getting stuck in there, and then all the energy that it takes to be there goes away, and then you're stuck in that, that sort of a focus, but it's a spherical focus, not a pinpoint focus, right?
Yeah, with trauma, it can kind of, for lack of a better term, it can kind of scramble our brain a little bit. So when we get into a trauma situation, there's parts of our brain that go, I don't know how to file this. There's too much information coming in. We just need to get through this. So instead of going into neat, orderly files in our brain, it just gets piled into a room, right? And it just gets scattered in there, and the door gets closed on it, and we've dealt with it. But if that stuff never gets dealt with, you get stuck. And your brain never learns how to create the pathways it needs to process through that appropriately and take from it what we need and what we can use and what we can learn from. Rather, it sticks us in that moment where the neural networks are a little bit fuzzy and everything's kind of mixed up and not connecting to the right things. We haven't processed through it, and then we become stuck. And so then we need to process through the stuck and create those pathways that didn't happen in the heat of the moment.
It's interesting. I can see that, because not in business, when you're trying to perform in business, it's similar to sports psychology, and you need to get your tasks done. You gotta toss things out of the way to get into a mindset where you can get things done that you need to get done.
Certainly, and then you have to clean up the mess you threw behind you.
Right. It's just like, and that's maybe, I wonder, a lot of guys, that they get to be my age, I'm, late 50s, 57 years old, and they end up, whatever, drinking themselves to sleep or eating themselves to death, really, so just instead of dealing with their thoughts, I guess, but they're high performers at work, right? But
Absolutely.
this is interesting insight. You have to take time to unpack that or to organize that. So we've got a little bit of time left. What's a good strategy for people to, that are needing to increase their performance by dealing with times that they don't need to perform? Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm performing, I'm setting everything aside. Okay, now I'm not at work, I'm not performing. My mind's still there, but now what are some good tactics with dealing with everything that I set aside? I guess making lists,
taking things out of the box. Yeah. So oftentimes in situations like that, one of the really good things when you're coming at it from a sports psychology aspect, sports don't happen in a vacuum, right? Life impacts sport. Everything that's happening on over here is going to impact your sport. So like you said there, you need to box it away and not deal with it because you need to perform. So whether that's in the athletic arena, business arena, whatever that is. But at some point you have to go back to this box. You have to take things out of that box. And so from that perspective, some of that can be dealt with through goal setting, through list making. List making is kind of a type of goal setting. I think sometimes you look at life and things get really, really busy and you go on a weekend and you're like, okay, I have XYZ to do, and you don't make a list and nothing happens, right? Or you make a list and all of a sudden you became more productive because you had sort of a short-term goal right in front of your face. And so when you do those sort of short, medium, long-term goals, it gives you something to continuously work towards. It's all about the process. It's not about the end result. So it's about taking pieces out in sort of bite-sized pieces and processing them in bite-sized pieces and figuring out sort of where they connect, what happens with them. Sometimes if you're really stuck in that, you do need some help in that. And that's kind of where we come in.
Mhm.
And, we have sort of tools and techniques and things like mindfulness, CBT, EMDR, all those kind of terms that you hear are techniques that we can use to help process through some of the stuff that's in the box that's making it so that life isn't, you're looking really, really good on the surface until there's something that triggers it. And then there's all of a sudden, kablooey, the file folder blew up because you put one piece of paper too many in it.
Mhm.
And so just those little things of reaching out and learning how to just bite-sized process those pieces of information.
Yeah, no, that's good information. Anything else that you'd like to share, but that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered it. I think it's for me, it's about the process. Success is not final and failure is not final. So anytime in life, I really look at it as if our main goal is getting to like this thing, we always want to win the trophy, get the job, whatever it is. That thing isn't final. So if we can't find joy in the journey and we can't find joy in the process, what's the point? Right? So it's learning how to make the process enjoyable and the process the goal rather than the end thing being the goal, the outcome.
And it's funny that is counterintuitive
It is.
that people think they need to suffer to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, and life is long if you do it that way. There's
Or-
joy in the small things.
Or procrastinate. You know what I
Or
mean? I'm running across more and more people, again, in their late 50s. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Like take down your Christmas tree before Easter. You know what I mean? Sort of story. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I understand procrastination very well.
but it's a frozen thing too. Or is it trying to don't want change? Is it what is just,
So many
what is
things.
procrastination?
I think procrastination, it's so individual. It's so individual. For some people, they procrastinate because of fear. Some people procrastinate just because it's kind of where they got stuck. Some people, have too many lists going on. So it's like too many things. I can't choose just one, so I won't do any of them. So I think it's really, really individual. But I am definitely, if you can find that sweet spot cure for procrastination, sign me up. But it's definitely a work in progress for sure.
Just gotta show up, I guess, eh?
You just gotta keep working through it. Piece by piece.
Just get there.
Little piece. Yeah,
Don't worry about getting there. Don't be afraid about getting there.
Bite-sized pieces.
Just bite-sized pieces. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That was a wonderful visit, Laura.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Laura Flis, counselor, master student at Power Psychology. Tune in with Power Psychology and find your joy. It was a great show. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Bye now.
Bye.